Welcome to the Fabric Spotlight, where we get perspectives on everything cloud infrastructure from our guests. Today, it's our pleasure to host Nelson Petracek, Chief Technology Officer at TIBCO. Welcome, Nelson.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We just have a nice conversation here.
Absolutely.
So, people know you today as the CTO of TIBCO.
Sure.
I'm sure you've had a long, illustrious career. So, maybe you can let our audience know your journey, where you started, how you came here.
Sure. I mean, long, yes. The rest is all debatable. But, I actually started life as a developer. So I was a developer, and actually I was a developer that was supporting other software systems.
I see.
And so in some ways, that's the best way to start, because you quickly learn what not to do by supporting other people's code. And then from there, I moved into additional development roles, consulting, some product work. And then there was a certain point in time there where I started working for US-based software companies. And I've been doing that ever since. So a number of years have been all spent in the field, primarily. Working on different innovation SWAT teams, different other field organizations, working on different technologies with customers, and really helping them see what these technologies can do for them. So that's a big part of my job.
I heard you say that you joined TIBCO at around 2000 Y2K.
Yes, it would have been 2000. Luckily, nothing happened with Y2K.
So almost 20 years now.
Yes,
2 decades.
Absolutely. I had a bit of a gap. That is a long time. I had a bit of a gap in between. So I always say I took a little bit of vacation, and then I came back. But indirectly, I've had connection to TIBCO or even TIBCO-related technologies for 20 years now.
20 years, awesome.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
That's really very interesting. So, let's talk about TIBCO's business and your role there.
Sure.
Kind of like various people whom you are interacting with, evangelization and all of those things. So, give us an idea of TIBCO's business in general and how your role fits in there.
Yeah, okay. I mean, TIBCO, and you mentioned you had known TIBCO for years and years longer than I've been there.
Yeah, actually.
But the idea here, TIBCO initially has all been around connecting information, moving data quickly, real time, all those kinds of things.
Right.
And then since then, obviously the company's evolved. We still do all of that. The buzzwords have changed, of course.
Enterprise application integration.
Yes, it used to be that, and then ESB and SOA, and now it's microservices, and all those sorts of things. So
we'll talk about all of that.
Yeah, okay, perfect. We're going to be here a long time. So we've kind of followed that evolution, APIs and event processing and that whole space. So we still definitely play in that space. But since then, we've moved into the ability to manage and unify information. So this now gets into data governance, metadata management, reference data management, all those data things. And then we also have capabilities in the analytics space. So whether it's visual analytics, AI, ML, and even some things around auto ML, model explainability, all those kinds of topics. So move data wherever it needs to be, unify it, however you want to bring it all together, and then make it, quote unquote, smarter with analytics, if you will.
So, since TIBCO started, there have been some other companies who are kind of like in that space. For instance, Splunk would say some of those things. Not exactly in the business data space that TIBCO is. They are more in the operational data. So, do you see yourself kind of like maybe having applicability in the audience that's by Splunk?
For us, our capabilities are very broad. So Splunk would definitely participate in what would now be termed as AIOps. That seems to be one of the big buzzwords of the day, if you will. Everything's an op nowadays. So whether you got DevSecOps or DevOps or Data Ops or Model Ops or whatever it is. But for us, it's around broadening that concept, this ability to bring data together in real time, multiple sources, regardless of where it might sit, private cloud, public cloud, hybrid, multi, whatever it ends up being. Usually it's a combination of almost all of the above. But bringing all that data together, regardless of vertical, and also a variety of different use cases, all the way straight from the high-level business scenarios all the way down to more infrastructure, IT, if you will.
Okay, so you do span all of
We span that whole range. A lot of organizations will use our software to build business applications that combine aspects of, let's say, master data management or metadata management, along with, could be data virtualization, could be some analytics, could be sprinkled in with some APIs, and you mash all that up and you get a business application. And so we spend a lot of our time, effort, and actually development resources as well, building capabilities in each of those three spaces.
So you mentioned, got this AIOps.
Yes.
So is that, or do you have kind of like a effort focused around AIOps? Do you have offerings in that space?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of an offshoot of what we do. I wouldn't say that it's a specific, we have a full line of 25 products that fit into that particular space. But when you look at it, AIOps is almost like an evil necessity because of everything else that's going on. So people are building microservices, applications, whatever they are, sooner, faster, better, all that. And it used to be that I think IT operations was a little more, I'll call it conservative, because their job is to keep things running. Their job is to keep things stable. And so they're not used to changing everything on the fly and deploying hourly and all that sort of thing, right? But as you build out more and more applications, more services, more capabilities, more APIs, more analytical models, whatever it might be, I have more data. IoT is hoping to either add to that problem or enrich that problem, I'll maybe call it, because now you've even got down to the edge where you need to manage some of these capabilities. So AIOps is almost like an offshoot that says, well, people can't do all of this. So how do I make all that information that I'm collecting about my IT operations, how do I just apply more intelligence, use analytical techniques, whether it's AI or machine learning or whatever, apply that to that problem. So it almost like it had to evolve in that fashion. And so we feed all those different systems and we can use our capabilities to help drive a lot of that. And so it tends to be just kind of this natural progression and evolution.
I see. Okay, that was, I was curious about that.
Sure.
So the Fabric is focused on cloud infrastructure and IoT infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I know that from my long association with TIBCO, the initial focus was really about real-time enterprise, in enterprise data centers.
Right.
But these days, there's so much effort on cloud adoption, moving apps to the enterprise apps to the cloud.
Sure.
So where is TIBCO in the journey of enterprise cloud adoption? How are you viewing that?
Right. I mean, for us, cloud is a key focus for ours. It's been now for a number of years. You find that some of the core functions and capabilities that people were looking for even in the past, things around real-time connectivity, how are you going to manage the endpoints, how are you going to build new services, how are you going to do analytics in all these different contexts, those kinds of things have kind of expanded. It's just broader now than what it was in the past. And so for us, we tend to kind of focus on three core principles. And the one is around how can I enable organizations to build cloud and cloud native solutions. And the on-prem systems are not going away anytime soon. Still going to have that mainframe or this, or it's definitely going to be that. And so we have to enable organizations to wire all of that together. And so we have this idea of designing our software to be cloud native, so we can run anywhere and everywhere. We don't just run on-premise or on AWS or on Azure or Google or whatever it might be.
So that's the first step.
That's the first step. We can run on all those different form factors.
Okay, makes sense.
So if somebody wants to take TIBCO, run it in Kubernetes on public cloud, you can do it. Then the other aspect of it is, well, can we use AI as a foundational component? So AI right now tends to be often treated as an add-on. And so we want to say, well, no, it actually should be baked into the platform, right? The platform should natively understand what AI and ML might mean to it and how you can utilize it. So there's that aspect to it. And then there's this idea of being open, right? So it used to be that at TIBCO, we had to build everything. We had to build the environment that it was going to run in. We had to build all the management and monitoring infrastructure. We had to build the admin server, all that kind of stuff, right? Now you don't have to. So we've spent a lot of time over the years breaking our software down, exposing everything through APIs, so that now you can pick and choose. We do some open source as well. We support some open source.
What is it that you open source?
Sure. So we have some projects, some products that we provide as open source. So we have a technology, for example, called Flogo. And Flogo is almost like a Golang based, so it's very small footprint. And it has a number of different capabilities, streaming, some declarative or rule-driven logic, some ability to prep data for AI ML models like TensorFlow or whatever, and then also build integration flows and microservices. Could even take it to function as a service architectures. So very small, very lightweight, open source. People can go download it, use it, run it. We also do things like support Kafka or Pulsar, right? Some of the messaging platforms that are out there. Call TIBCO, systems down at 3 a.m. in the morning, we'll help you out.
Right. That's
so,
the openness.
So a lot of those kinds, yeah. And then everything else being open as well.
So what is the strategy behind that open source? How does that? How do you see TIBCO's universe expanding?
Right.
Because you have that open source.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really allowed us to get to other personas. So now, it used to be it was the integration developer. Right? We focused on the integration developer, or we focused on the data scientist, let's say. Now it's very much, it's very broad. Okay. So you might get what the analysts will call the citizen integrator or the citizen data scientist.
Reach more into the developers.
Yeah, or and if you go the other way, reach more into developers.
Okay.
And it's going to be combinations of their, all of the above, if you will.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned, microservices and all of those kind of things.
Sure.
So one of the issues that we hear is that people get very concerned about the security of the data, like yes. Especially if you are on-prem and cloud, and there is this TIBCO bus spanning all of this.
Right.
How do you see the cloud application security, and what role is TIBCO performing in reassuring enterprises that it's okay?
Right.
You can do that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, for us, we're not a infrastructure as a service provider, so we will run on, let's say, an AWS or an Azure or Google, whatever it might be. And so for us, we're leveraging and utilizing a lot of the capabilities that those guys will provide. So, in a way, we're enabling organizations to, let's say, if they're worried about things like data sovereignty, right? Data can't leave these countries' walls, if you will, right? That would be one of the items. Yeah. So if you get into that kind of set of considerations, we will run on AWS as an example, and we're very transparent about where things are parked. So obviously location is key, right? Location, as is being transparent about what we're doing. And it's normally—
That will go into things like GDPR.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Right? And these are all considerations, and all the different certifications that are out there. You need to make sure that people are aware that are using our cloud capabilities where their data is going to sit. Right? So be very transparent about it. And one of the key considerations is often not where it sits during the normal operations, but what happens if a failure occurs, right? Now where's that data, where has it been moved to, and now where am I accessing it? So you have to be careful when you're looking at it from an organizational standpoint. It's not just where's my data.
There's geofencing.
Yeah, exactly. So where's it going to sit in the event of a failure? And so we're very transparent and open about it. Now luckily, we're not a database vendor. So we're not providing the data warehouse or things like that. So we're utilizing that capability and allowing you to do either governance or analytics or whatever around it. So the organization has to look at it as a series of layers. Where's the data parked? Am I using a cloud vendor's data store? What am I doing in that arena? And then I can layer TIBCO on top.
Yeah, the interesting thing about TIBCO is that you're not a data store, obviously,
correct.
But you are very much involved in data in motion.
Absolutely,
right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you mentioned microservices, for instance, and
Yeah.
there is a lot of concern over private, the PII, privately identifiable information that is transiting over, say, between services, and particularly if those are on different locations, data center on the cloud.
Yeah.
So is TIBCO doing something specifically to show about the security and privacy of that kind of information?
Yeah. I mean, when you look at it, so on the one side of our business, which deals a lot with how you manage data, how you govern data, who has access to what, you can put privacy rules around that data. Even our data virtualization technology, you can specify at different levels, row, column level, whatever it might be, who can see what data. So you do have some control in that form, right? Even where you cache the information and so on, you have control over that. If you're wiring applications together, then you get into things like, well, what security model am I using? Am I encrypting the links? What is the underlying cloud vendor providing? How are the microservices? Where are they located? How are you moving the data? And then we can monitor all that data movement as well, of course, to try and detect situations where maybe the pattern of data access is outside of what might be normal. Right? So you get into a lot of anomaly detection kind of capabilities around the data and so on. So it's a combination of all the above, and that's for us. we need to make sure that when we are moving data from point A to point B, that it's getting there securely, it's getting to the right place, it is following things like geolocation, data sovereignty, and so on. So we need to make sure that those guidelines are a foundational component of any solution that we're deploying.
In the microservices area particularly, there seems to be this concern over, because previously things were monolithic.
Sure, yeah.
Data was all there.
Right.
Now data is being exchanged
Sure.
with various places. So people seem to want to know what kind of data got exchanged between what services, and some kind of compliance around that.
Yep.
So is TIBCO providing those kind of capabilities as well?
Yeah, I mean, we have the ability to track all the data as it flows through all this infrastructure, so that's obviously one step. Another part that we have found to be very beneficial is the use of things like a data catalog. So if I want to catalog what data I have, where it sits, who has access to it, who's using it, what's the lineage, what's the workflows around the information when I go to manage it and so on, that's also very, very important, because as organizations are gathering more data,
right,
oftentimes they just lose track of what they have and also how good it is.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not even just a matter of how secure is it, who's using it, where's it sitting and so on, but how good is it? If I'm going to use it for analytical purposes, can I trust it? Right? And how do I do that? And so we offer data cataloging capabilities that can go out, introspect the data sets, catalog, use AI/ML to almost categorize the data elements, right? So you know that an address is an address, a name is a name, whatever it might be, right? And then drill down into things like lineage and even crowdsourcing, right? Let the company decide if it's a good data set or not, right? So you can do things like that.
Interesting, very interesting. Yeah,
it's a very interesting space.
So, so there is a specific new buzzword, if you will.
Okay. Another
Gartner,
one?
Yeah, another one. Go figure. So Gartner has come up with this thing, what they call cloud security posture management.
Okay.
These are things like, are my security centers configured correctly?
Right.
So the idea is to gather up all the configurations and then match them up against requirements like PCI or Cloud Security Alliance and things like that.
Right.
So are you doing things like that, or are you hearing that from your customers?
So we definitely hear it. For us, it's really twofold. One is, if an organization is deploying software, TIBCO software in whatever form they're deploying it in, that information has to be fed into such a system that's going to make sure that everything's configured properly, managed, and so on. Yeah, a bit where we kind of feed into that. And a large part of that has to do with automation as well. So how you roll out different services, how you roll out different models, just that overall pipeline, if you will, and how you automate that pipeline, that of course can feed into such a system as well, to make sure that everything's done consistently according to certain governance standards and so on. And then the other part of it, of course, is our own cloud. So we offer almost like an iPaaS kind of capability, which sits on top of, again, AWS or these cloud vendors. But we need to make sure that we have our own security team that's aware of cybersecurity issues, and we have to make sure that our cloud is GDPR compliant and PCI and SOC and all those kinds of things. That also has to fit in. And so we've kind of got those two worlds that we have to play in. One is run wherever the customer wants us to run, and then we have to fit into the cloud security items. And then also from our own cloud, make sure that if an organization comes to it, that is also they're making sure that it's secure and they know where their data sits, and we're very transparent about it, and all that kind of stuff. So
very interesting. So you mentioned IoT in passing earlier. So that is a very different world from the Wall Street and health and all of that we have been used to, right? So maybe you can kind of like explain TIBCO's approach to the IT, the OT world, where the industrial, the caterpillars of the world, manufacturing and oil rigs. How is TIBCO approaching that world?
I tend to break it down into sort of three components. And we're not a device manufacturer, so
so that's out.
That's out. So we don't worry about that. Not gonna look at it. I've got guys that do that at home. That's just for fun, but that's out. So really, you got to look at it from an edge standpoint, you look at it from a gateway standpoint, then you look at it from almost like I'll call it data center, but it could be cloud or whatever it is. It's kind of the enterprise level, if you will. And so we see different TIBCO capabilities playing in each of those three layers. So I should be able to take an AI model that I built using, let's say, TIBCO tooling against historical data, which I've collected in my data lake. I should be able to take that model and push it down to the edge so that I can run it, I'll say, either on the device or close to. I mean, again, it depends what you mean by device and the capabilities and so on. But I should be able to take that logic and run it at the edge. And then I should be able to stream that logic forward. And then maybe at the gateway level, I'm collecting multiple streams of data from multiple devices, correlating that together and making a decision at that level. Or I can even go further and make a decision, again, using this feed of information at the enterprise level. So our capabilities can kind of span these different tiers or these different layers, if you will, of the architecture. So that's how we tend to look at it. By the time you get to the right-hand side, it's data. Right? It's
analytics.
It's analytics. Data. It's governance. I mean, all that kind of stuff falls into that.
Right.
And then as you get closer to the edge, well, then you're kind of funneling down how that information is being processed. And of course, your compute is getting smaller, so you need to take that into account, and things like devices going offline, coming back online. You know what connectivity is like, and all that sort of
numbers
stuff.
Game, right?
Absolutely, no, that's right. You could have 10 gateways, but 100,000 devices, or, whatever the math ends up being.
It's a different issue altogether.
Yep, definitely.
So we touched upon some of the things that I wanted to talk about next already, which was that we have this notion about reimagining infrastructure for the distributed era, where you have distributed apps, distributed compute, distributed. So things are all getting distributed trust.
It's funny how it goes through waves. We had mainframes, then client server, and then everybody brought everything back, and now we're distributing everything again.
It comes back in a different guise.
Right.
So we see that same thing, that things maybe in a sense got over centralized with the public clouds. Now people are starting to think more about the edge, what needs to be at the edge.
Right.
And there is another angle to it, which is 5G. So at TIBCO, you mentioned IoT as an edge use case. That's obvious. So are there other such things with 5G or anything that you are looking at it from a more distributed perspective?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the main focus for that is primarily around how you can enable more and more capabilities communication-wise and whatnot at the edge, right? You're dealing with the latency side of it, or how many devices you can have, or whatever that happens to be. And so for us, it's definitely focused on a couple different things. One is how you process that data, again, that 5G enables. And then also, what are the new business models that is going to enable? Because that in itself, this new capability, if you will, is going to enable multitude of organizations, not just the telcos, but anybody that's actually being able or wants to leverage this new communications infrastructure to do new things from a business standpoint. So whether that was related to things like customer experience, customer journey, which is a big topic in the industry and market nowadays. How can I streamline the experience for the customer and do it in a almost like non-intrusive manner? It should just be a natural part of my surrounding. I almost call it digital twin is often a term that's used with IoT. I almost say it's almost like a digital twin, not of a device, but a person. Right? So whether you're a student, whether you're a patient, whether you're a consumer, whatever you are, you almost can have this very dynamic model of an individual, not a group, but the person. And so now, if I have all this ability to take all these inputs in and my latency is much less and so on, well, the way in which I can interact with that person is going to be much more timely, relevant, and contextual. So I think there's probably new business models that are going to emerge as people kind of work their way through.
So are you experimenting with some of these things?
We are, yes. Yeah, there's the timing of this talk is a little bit off because I'd be able to announce a couple things in about 2-3 weeks.
Okay,
so we look for that. But yeah, we are trying to.
You heard it here first,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is true. Absolutely. So we're really trying to bring together some different technology themes and concepts and some mashups, if you will, of different capabilities to see what we can do on some of these use cases.
Right. Okay. So thank you. So I think we are kind of like coming to the end of this thing, and so something light again. So you had various experiences, and our audience is mostly entrepreneurs.
Yep.
So from entrepreneurs' perspective, are there like tips and suggestions that you would like to give in terms of what it is like to work with a company like TIBCO, what you look for when, say, for instance, our companies come and want to talk to you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, a large part of it is really, so I get a lot of requests, and some of these requests are better than others, and the reason why they're better than others is because the entrepreneur, the startup, whatever that company is, has taken the time to understand a little bit about TIBCO, what we do, and where they can provide value, right? It's got to be very much the synergistic approach. It's got to be very complementary. I mean, I've had discussions where people have come in and said, "Oh, at TIBCO, you guys have a fantastic customer base. We want to work with those customers." Like, well, great, but why?
But why?
Right? I mean, we have a lot of good customers, granted, but I am very protective of those customers because they get inundated with all this stuff, and I need to make sure I'm bringing them value. So you have to demonstrate to me what that value is. And I don't expect you to know everything perfectly, but at least I should be aware that they did some background, some homework.
Customer value proposition.
There's got to be a value prop, and it's got to be, like you said, very complementary. And whether it's a new capability, an additional capability, makes one of our capabilities stronger, extends it, whatever it might be. That's how you kind of look at it. Now we specifically set up a program within TIBCO to help that process, and so we call it TIBCO Labs. But it's very much this external customer partner facing program where we can work on different technology areas collaboratively with external parties. Again, whether it's customers, partners, startups, or whatnot, and really look for what is that value? How would it apply? How would the two technologies mash up? And so we do a lot of work with organizations around those different aspects. And then, if it makes sense, we can jointly go and showcase this to a set of customers and say, yeah, there's some value here, and here's why. Here's how it would work.
Okay. Excellent. So thank you very much. Thanks for
you're
sharing
welcome.
your views.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very good talking with you.
Discussion.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And looking forward to a great discussion today. Looking forward to the next episode of Spotlight.